Okay, so we are live, and I am really excited to be here today talking to Judith Yeabsley from otherwise known as the Confident Eater. And I'm really excited about doing this live stream with Judith because I know so many of my clients have struggles and have challenges with picky eaters, selective eaters, and just all issues surrounding getting kids to eat their food. So welcome, Judith. It is absolutely lovely to have you here on this Saturday afternoon to talk about kids and food.
Thanks, Jacqueline. It's lovely to be here, and I'm always so excited to be able to talk about kids and food.
Yes, well, it's obviously a passion of yours. So what I would love to do is just to launch into the first question, which I'm dying to ask you, because I know that whenever people are drawn to being in service to others, which is definitely what you do, there's always some kind of backstory, right? There's always some history of how you got to be doing what you're doing. So what is that backstory? How did you end up being Judith, the Confident Eater?
I'll give you the abridged version. So I've always been super passionate about nutrition for children. I've always thought it just makes sense. Good stuff in, you just feel better. I know I feel better if I eat better. So that was always a passion for me. But working with parents in both Australia and New Zealand, what I realised was that every second parent was saying, you know what, Judith, I know what to feed my child. I just don't know how to get them to eat it. And so I went looking for someone to refer them to, and I realised that as a society, we've got this big gap. We've got all these parents who are really struggling around mealtimes, but we don't have people who are supporting them to get their child eating. If you've got a baby, lots of stuff around breastfeeding, you know, getting them from milk onto solids. But if you've got a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old or a 5-year-old or a 10-year-old, God forbid, who doesn't eat well, where's that person? And so that was where I thought, wow, there isn't that person. And I set out to become that person. And I'm just so glad that I did, because it's been the most amazing journey, and it has just been so rewarding to be able to relieve what is for parents an enormous stress, an enormous frustration, and something that really just brings a lot of guilt and a lot of, you know, sort of general discomfort. If your child doesn't eat well, it just affects so many aspects of your life and everybody else in that wider family as well.
Yeah. Oh, gosh, absolutely. And I mean, in my work, I mean, I absolutely know what you're saying, and it's such a good thing, and it's just loaded with guilt and loaded with, you know, even a shame around it. You know, but I know a lot of the clients that I work with, they don't want to take their kids out because their kids are so fussy, or they don't want to take their kids, you know, to restaurants and things like that. So there's a load of guilt and shame, and it's not like us as parents need any more, right? Because even just parent is loaded up enough. But so I love to talk about parent traps in my work, and I reckon the fussy eating trap is definitely one that parents get stuck in. So where do you think it comes from, and where does this trap come from? How do parents end up in this, I'm going to call it the fussy eating trap?
You know what, that's a really good question to ask, but it's also one where there's not a simple answer, because children don't eat for so many different reasons. And something I love to talk about is the fact that this possibly has absolutely nothing to do with you as a parent. And as a parent, and especially as a mum, we tend to take on guilt for all sorts of things, regardless of whether it's our fault or not. If we've got a child that's not reading very well, we automatically assume it's something that, you know, we didn't read to them enough, or maybe we didn't notice early enough. You know, we assume all sorts of guilt. But when it comes to eating, there are a lot of children who are just predestined to be more uncomfortable around food than other children, which is why I work with a lot of families where you've got 3 children, 2 eat perfectly normally, 1 just eats crackers. And it's something that's just inbuilt in that child. Now, it doesn't mean to say that we can't support them to do better and we can't help them to eat more comfortably. Absolutely we can. And as a parent, we're the best person to do that. But it does mean that we haven't necessarily caused this. On the other hand, there are a lot of things that we can inadvertently do that work against us, but we don't know what we don't know. And eating's a funny thing because it should be this lovely, organic, natural process. But actually, it often isn't. If your child eats well, it all seems really simple and you can't understand why someone's other child can't do it. If your child doesn't eat well, you go, oh my goodness, how do I do that? And then there's very little information around what to actually do. So then we start falling into those picky eating pitfalls, which is what you were talking about, where you fall into a little trap and it's really easy to do. So, for example, you've got a 2-year-old and suddenly they stop eating dinner. And so then you're really worried because obviously they need to eat dinner. And if they don't eat dinner, they wake up in the night because they're hungry, which is a really bad thing for everybody. But also you're so stressed that they're not getting the energy they need, they're not getting the nutrients they need. So then, you know, one night you give them some plain pasta and they gulp it down and you go, oh, thank goodness for that. And then the next night, all they want is the plain pasta or they're not going to eat. And suddenly you're in that trap. And it's really, really hard. And I'm going to throw this other thing in here because I think this is really valuable to understand. As mums, we are biologically hardwired to feed our children and feed them and make them happy doing so. It is so inbuilt. So I know my baby is 12 and he's almost as tall as me. But when he comes and goes, Mum, I'm hungry, the first thing I think is, oh my goodness, I've got to give you food. It's just so hardwired in me to want to give him food. So it gets really, really difficult when we've got a little one, or when we've got someone who isn't eating very well, or when we've got somebody who we feel is not, you know, isn't the biggest. You know, all of these things start to mess with our heads because then we say, hang on, it's much better for me to give them food than for them to go hungry. And suddenly we start falling into all these little traps along the way.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really, really important thing that you've shared around not taking that on. I mean, a lot of the work that I do in supporting parents to find more fun and freedom in their lives is to absolve themselves from the responsibility. And this is exactly what you're talking about. It's that inbuilt kind of survival responsibility that we take on for ourselves as parents, and that we have to make sure it happens and by any means necessary, just get some food into the kid. And I think it's beautiful that you've shared that, sometimes it's just the personality of the child or the individual makeup of the child. And as you say, you might have two kids that eat fine and then one just, completely throws you a curveball and you're absolutely stuck in this fussy eating trap. And I love that because I think that in itself is going to be enough to support parents to actually get some help around it, because otherwise if they're in that kind of blaming themselves, shaming themselves, loading themselves up with guilt, it might block them, I'm assuming, from reaching out to someone like you to get some support.
Yeah, and I think it's a lot of parents' guilty secret. So although you may have a child that's really, really struggling around food and it's really obvious to you, you don't want to admit that you've failed in one of your key responsibilities as a parent. I mean, let's face it, being able to feed our child is one of our core responsibilities. And when we're not doing that, suddenly we feel like, we've made a mistake. And I speak to a lot of especially mums who are just, so capable in all areas of their life, and they're really successful in their jobs, and they're really great parents, and they're really intuitive around their child. And they say to me, they go, but Judith, I just can't get them to eat. You know, so you've got everything that they're doing super, super well. But then when it comes to the eating, it's just not going right. But I always think, well, hang on, if that was the child wasn't walking or wasn't talking or wasn't reading, we'd say, okay, well, we need some help. Let's go get some help and let's get it fixed. And yes, you do. You always feel a bit of guilt because you're a parent, and that's, you know, that goes with the territory. But you're not going to say, well, my child not walking is absolutely my fault. But when it comes to eating, we often do, and so that does, to a degree, prevent us from moving forwards and looking for help. And I really love that we could remove that stigma, and we could remove that blame as a society, because it's so easy to look over and go, oh, look, she's feeding her child nuggets again, or whatever it might be. And it's so easy to judge, but we just don't know what's going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And one of the tools that I use is called the face slap, and it's literally like, oh my God, I'm stuck in the trap. And, you know, it brings lightness and humor and laughter to, you know, what can be a really challenging situation. And as you say, it just, you know, judgment, whether it's coming from outside of yourself and you feel it coming in, or the what I say, all judgment is self-judgment. You're judging yourself, and that's the reason why you can feel it. Well, what I wanted to ask you about, Judith, and this is about, you know, the energy that is behind how we operate in our lives as parents to do with food, because I know that when it becomes stressful, and then there's like this charged energy that starts to become, you know, to come around anything to do with food, all meal times, anything to do with cooking, and it becomes this very, very stressful situation. And I know that when I work with parents, and in a whole host of other situations and issues, that is the piece. It's like when that charged energy is there, then the children feel it, and it becomes a thing. So how can we support parents, or how do you support parents in terms of, you know, supporting them with the energy that they're bringing to the situation, you know, with their picky eaters or their selective eaters? Because I know that when I turn up to a Facebook Live or an interview or a speaking engagement, my energy is everything, you know, because if I'm not animated and I'm not, you know, excited to be there, and, you know, if I'm just sort of sitting here talking like this, and, you know, the energy that we're bringing to our parenting is everything. So what can they do? What can parents do? How do you support them with their selective eaters in terms of the energy that they're bringing to the situation?
Well, I think you've probably touched on one of the key things that I think is missing for parents when their child doesn't eat, and that's the confidence, which is why I'm the confident eater. Because if we're not confident our child's able to eat something, how are they going to be confident that they can eat something? And it's really natural that we lose our confidence because we try something and it fails, and then we try something else and it fails, and then we read something on the internet and we try that and it fails, and then our best friend says, do this, you know, all picky eaters eat this recipe, or all picky eaters respond to this, and they don't. And so suddenly we start to believe that our child is different, and they're more stubborn, anxious, rigid around food, and so they're not going to be able to eat. So suddenly we're on the back foot because we're starting to say, this is not going to work for my child. And we're entering into situations, meals, strategies, thinking at the back of your head, you know what, I'll try this, but I know it's not going to work. And of course, as our child's most important relationship, we communicate that really well to them. And so they go, oh, no, it's not going to work. And suddenly they don't believe it's going to work. We don't believe it's going to work. And we really are stuck in that position. And then all the other negative stuff sort of piles in on top of you, because you wake up in the morning and the first thing you go is, oh no, what am I going to feed, you know, Sam for dinner? Because he's got to eat tonight, because he's got, you know, because otherwise he's going to be waking up in the night. Or we're thinking, oh my goodness, we've got a party today. Oh, what can I do? Because Mia's not going to eat at the party, you know. And so suddenly it does, and it builds and it builds, and it becomes this huge thing that can really take over a parent's life and be such a big thing for them. And so part of what I do is when we're starting is to teach parents to be confident themselves and be confident that their child is actually able to do a lot more than they believe they can, and a lot more than the child believes they can, and that actually having the confidence that they're able to do something different can make all the difference in the world. And if we think about swimming, for example, and how, despite the fact that our child's screaming blue murder, we're telling them they're going to have all sorts of fun when they're a toddler going in the swimming pool, and then it'll be fine without mummy being in there and all this sort of stuff. We don't do the same thing about food.
Yes. Oh my goodness.
And yet we have to.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really great example, and it kind of makes me laugh because I started using a couple of tools when my niece came to live with us, because I haven't had any issues in terms of being particularly picky or selective with both of my boys, so I've been quite blessed in that. And then my niece comes to live with us, and oh my God, I get yelled at. This is disgusting, with what I would put in front of her. So it was just like, wow, okay, I'm getting all my tools out of my belt here to see how I can navigate this. Because I never really had, I'd never had the opportunity in terms of my own individual journey. And I know that the way that I work, I bring a lot of playfulness into my work, and that's how I start to build the confidence and, the resilience that you're talking about, and especially in terms of challenge. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I remember bringing she had an apple, and I actually did a live video on this, and she said, "No, I'm not eating that. It's too pointy. That apple was too pointy." And I was just, I was looking at my brother, her dad, and we were just having this kind of eye contact and just burst out laughing because it was the funniest thing. And I just started talking, pretending I was the apple, saying, "Oh, she won't eat me." And I just completely hammed it up and made this funny little joke about the apple getting upset because she didn't want to eat him because he was too pointy. And then she said to me, "Oh, can I have Mr. Pointy Apple in my lunchbox, for the next day at school?" And I was just like, wow, that is the shift that you're talking about, isn't it? It's like, how can we move into a place as parents where we're not actually loading it up with that it's never going to happen or it's going to fail from the very beginning. I'd love to hear whether that's sort of part of your, repertoire of tools of how to shift into confidence.
Well, I would say that we need to put the fun back into food. We need to put the joy back into food, and we need to put the pleasure back into food, not just for the children, but for the parents, because when you've had a fussy eater for a while, suddenly you start to lose your enthusiasm for food because it all just becomes so difficult, and often mealtimes are stressful. And so suddenly it's not just that the child's not enjoying their food, suddenly the parents aren't enjoying the food. And if we're putting across, well, hang on, I'm just going through the motions here, that's really different from, oh my goodness, this is so much fun, I'm enjoying this, and oh, this new chicken dish is fabulous. And what, I mean, obviously that's what we want to put across, because we want to sell our child on the fact that food is fun and it is enjoyable and they're loving it. Even if they are sitting there and eating their plain pasta, it's got to be aspirational. Got to set that bar high. You're chasing me, I'm up here, you're down here, but you can get there. And so putting the fun back into food is a huge part of what I do when I work with families. And it's a lot of it's in the marketing, because, as with the apple, that's a great example. And I mean, you don't have to be a clown and, dance on tables at every mealtime. But if I say to any selective eater on the planet, would you rather eat this new thing that you've never seen before, or your favorite thing that you love? It's a no-brainer which they're going to choose. And so if I say, do you want to eat this new thing, the chances are they're going to say no, and they're going to say no probably 99.99% of the time. And so I would never ask that question, because I'm going to get the no. And once we get the no, there's very little room for coming back from the no. And so it is, how can I do this in a way that builds that comfort level, that builds that enjoyment, that makes my child go, actually, you know what? I need that pointy apple and I need it in my lunchbox.
Yeah, I love it. And I love the putting the fun back into food. That is just so cool. And one thing that I thought about, because when I was doing another Facebook Live, completely different topic, I was talking about upselling the parent. So we're upselling the food, right? We want to bring it and make it super fun. It's like, and just like you say, I have to have that. I really have to have that. And the other thing that I wanted to mention, which I kind of I had a bit of a joke with my niece, because I was just like, you won't die if you eat that red pepper. We won't have to call an ambulance, because sometimes it's almost like we get into these parenting situations and it's like it's an emergency room situation, or that's what we kind of create. The energy around it's like, oh my God, call 111. It's an emergency situation. I need an ambulance. So I just kind of started using that in a way as like you won't die. It's not going to kill you. And she would sort of look at me with a little sort of smirk on her face, and then she'd actually try it. And the other thing that I found really useful was having other kids around. And I don't know whether this definitely helped my niece, but in terms of, if you've got a couple of other kids that do eat and one that doesn't, that being around other kids that eat and sucking out that negative energy, really, any kind of negative energy that's coming into making it a big thing, really changed things for my niece, and she just started following suit almost, So, yeah.
And I think you've got a good point there, but like most things, picky eating's a spectrum. So you've got children who are on that super, super extreme end where I'm eating 5 foods and anything outside of that I don't even want on the table. And then you've got them at the other end of the spectrum, which is, you know what, I just prefer not to eat the broccoli. And so depending where you sit on the spectrum is going to depend on how well you respond to a lot of these strategies. And so a lot of the strategies we read about on the internet work really well for children who are on that, okay end of the spectrum, where, you know what, food's a little bit uncomfortable, but you know what, in the swing of life, it's not that big a challenge. Whereas if you're on the far end of that spectrum, where food makes you anxious and the thought of something new going in your mouth that you're not comfortable with is like eating a spider, then some of those tactics actually, unfortunately, can make things worse and not better. Because if you're super anxious and somebody's making a joke about it, then it can make it worse for you, because people aren't taking your feelings seriously. So horses for courses, and it really depends where you sit on that spectrum. And so a lot of the families I work with are on that really extreme end, where there is enormous anxiety around food. And so for them, the thought of eating a capsicum or a pepper or whatever is akin to that it is an emergency situation. Because I just really physically, I'm looking at that, and sometimes it's a pizza, or it's a lolly that's green and not red, and you look at it and go, like, there's no way, I just can't do that. So, and I think it's important to recognize that there are really different ends of that spectrum, and that each family and each child is different, so that things that work in general for some children could be an absolute disaster for another one.
Yeah, I mean, that is just gold right there, isn't it? It really is. In terms of, because I just remembered a friend of a friend talking about her son who only drinks Up and Go, those milk cartons. That's all they have. And I'm trying to get your name to them, because I know that, that's that's that end of the spectrum, right? That's definitely that end of the spectrum. And so if I'm going to put this question to you, when do parents know? I mean, I think that's pretty clear, but I think that some parents may not know when it is getting towards that end of the spectrum. How do they know when to come and work with you, when they've got an issue that is not being able to be addressed with those other tools and approaches?
I would say that this is really interesting, because often we think parents don't know and we need to have all these sort of parameters and these checks and things. When your child doesn't eat normally, and when you're on that extreme end, parents just know. I offer a free talk to parents, and I'm happy to talk to any parent who isn't quite sure, or whose child has eating challenges and they just want to talk to somebody. I'm more than happy to talk to anybody and do that as a complimentary first chat. I would say 99% of the parents who talk to me, their children have a big challenge around eating. The parents know, and they've known for a long time. And often these parents have known from the time their child is 12 months old, 6 months old, 18 months old. If something's going wrong as a parent, and I always say to parents, trust yourself. Forget what your mum's saying, forget what your GP's saying, forget what, Plunkett or whatever is. If you think there's a problem, 99% of parents are right on the money. So if you think there's an issue, then I would act on that gut and say, you know what? No, there is a challenge. My child does have a challenge. All this is just noise. I know my child better than anyone else, because you do.
Beautiful. Yeah, I love that. And I think that something you touched on, a few moments ago, which was when the parents' food, when their intake of food or their relationship with food is impacted. Because I definitely had a client who I did send to you, and he definitely had that, where he was starting to really not look forward to meal times and was actually losing weight himself, because he wasn't eating properly and eating well. So it is so good to have you around, Judith, for those other extremes of the spectrum, where I think parents are, kind of at a loss when they're stuck in these traps of how to get their kids to eat and what to actually do. So I would love to know, Judith, what you've got coming up, because I know you've got some cool things coming up, and how people can find out more about you. Okay, so I have a book that is written specifically for parents of picky eaters, and it is all about how to teach your child to try foods in 7 simple steps. And it's based around my experience and working with 100+ families a year. So everything in there I know has been tested and it's proven to work. And so it's even for those most extreme of children, how do we get our child to try food? Because really, if your child can consistently try foods, then you don't have a problem, you're moving forwards. But for a lot of families, it's just getting that child to start that trying process, which is the key issue. Once you get that rolling, everything else sort of slots into place. So that's coming out hopefully at the end of this month. But next week, I'm starting my October Complete Confidence program. And this was designed specifically for busy, time poor, energy deficient parents, which is, most of us, where we're sort of just running just to keep up with life. And so it's a weekly program, and each week you get a really short video. It's 5-10 minutes, so it's really manageable to do. You get a task to go away and practice with your child, and it'll be something small that you go and implement in your house with your child. There's a weekly phone call if you want to take advantage of that. And so each week we build on confidence and competence. And we do a lot of the things that you're not going to read about on the internet. So how do you change the dynamics? How do you change the approach? How do you build the confidence for yourself and the confidence for your child? All of that we start with, and we work through that. And then we obviously get into the how do you get your child to try foods. So
it's a weekly program. You only have to make a commitment month by month. So you can jump in for a month and go, is this for me? Is it working for me? If it's not, you can always jump out again. If it's working, and trust me, it really does work for parents, then you sign up for the next month and away we go again. And so some of the things that parents have got from this are suddenly having their child eat from the lunchbox where they haven't been eating from the lunchbox. Having children just randomly eat new things where they haven't eaten a new food for 6 months or so. Having meal times where they're actually laughing at the table and they're sitting around and they're having fun. All of these things can happen through the program. If you've got a child, sorry, my headphones just keep falling out. I need bigger ears. Okay. If you've got a child that's on the really extreme end, then you may not see, the spectacular results, but you'll be putting into place those strategies that really will have a positive long-term impact. If you've got a child that's, not quite so extreme, then you could see enormous progress just in the first sort of month to 2 months. So I would like, and it's the price, it's $12 a week. It's really been costed out because I would just love to be able to share this with as many parents as possible and just be able to give the gift of confidence to parents so that they just don't sit in that little puddle of stress and frustration and guilt because there's no necessity to do so.
Beautiful. I love that you popped in there because I was going to ask you, even if your child's not at, those extreme ends and, things are kind of going okay, they can always be better, right? So that's
absolutely. And sometimes we don't realize how, like I always say, eating true north's like this, and sometimes we don't realize how we've sort of gone off like this and we're sort of over here and it's okay. But we're doing all this compensatory sort of stuff. So we know, well, our child will eat this pasta, but only if we have it with this sauce. And suddenly you've just introduced all these extra little ifs and buts, and there's a lot of compensatory behavior going on instead of just going, oh, you know what? This is what I'm cooking. This is what I'm serving. Everybody eats it and that's all easy, so it is, okay, well, I can't get these apples because they're not a bright enough red and suddenly, and I think most parents can step back and go, oh, yeah, yeah, I am doing some of that because that's what we do as parents because we want our child to eat.
Yeah. Yes, I absolutely hear you. So, Judith, it has been amazing to have you on and having this incredible chat around, the spectrum of selective and fussy eating that our children are all along there somewhere, aren't they?
Absolutely.
Do you have any final words that you want to share with us? And I will put the links under this video for your pages and how to get in touch with you, how to get onto that complimentary call if people want to, get a bit more information, and how to get onto your program. But do you have any final words that you would love to wrap up our session with?
I always end with the same words. If you're a child, if you're a parent and you're struggling with your child's eating, then firstly, you're probably right. So act on that. Don't let people brush you off because if you think there's a problem, there probably is. Secondly, that you can make a difference. It doesn't matter how extreme your child is, you can make a difference. Nobody spends as much time, is invested, or knows a child as well as a parent. Therefore, you're the best person to work with them. And thirdly, if you need support, then push, and go find support. In whatever way makes you comfortable. That's what you should be doing. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I'm super excited for the beginning of your program next week, and I hope that you get lots of parents who are going to gain confidence and allow their kids to gain confidence through this as well in terms of to eat in a much more healthy way. Yes. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me, and I look forward to hearing how the program is going, and I will put the links under the video, and until then, talk to you all soon.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on.
Alrighty, bye.